Việt Nam thì đã có một số các cái khảo sát đánh giá việc áp dụng an toàn sinh học tại các cái trang trại chăn nuôi lợn.
Câu hỏi đầu tiên thì xin được phép gửi đến tiến sĩ Vũ Thị Thu Trà.
Namaste and good afternoon, everybody, to the fight to the AMR. And as for Nepal, Nepal is also moving forward towards the approval of the National Action Plan on AMR. People from multiple sectors came together, sat down together, discussed together, and have drafted a National Action Plan. And we are quite in the verge of approval of the action plan by the Council of Ministers.
Introduced a policy in which we have stopped the import of antimicrobials to be used as growth promoter in any form. So with this policy in action, the antimicrobial use of macrolides has gone down, and definitely it has supported our interventions to reduce the antimicrobial resistance in animals.
Villacorte, if there are monitoring activities or regulations on AMR, and how is the Philippine government intervention on the monitoring activity implemented in the Philippines?
To achieve in the future or in the nearest future is to come up with a guideline or a protocol for antimicrobial use, and likewise an AMR stewardship plan, that will definitely be utilized for all the sectors in our country.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isao Crouch. 皆様、本日はウェビナーにご参加いただきありがとうございました。本ウェブナーの開催に際してご尽力いただいたファバの桑座会長、コラゾン先生、そしてフィリピン動物医薬品協会のメンデ会長、講師の皆様方をはじめ関係者の方々に御礼申し上げます。
including erythromycins, tyrosines, tetracyclines, postomycins, effective January 2021.
Di dalam makanan haiwan yang juga digunakan di dalam manusia. Lebih penting juga adalah penggunaan antimicrobial secara berhemah.
The way that the National Action Plan is getting implemented. Thank you for your contributions for this, and I wish that there are more opportunities for others to see what Malaysia is doing. In FAO, we continue to work globally in the food and agriculture front in the fight of antimicrobial resistance. So like in Malaysia, we support the food and agriculture sectors across, not only in Asia, but globally, in raising awareness, in supporting AMR surveillance and research, also in reinforcing good practices and promoting prudent use, as well as supporting the governance structures and mechanisms behind this. Together with the tripartite partners, WHO and OIE, we join you in your individual and collective efforts to address this global health issue. Be coming from the government services, be it in academia, research, in the industry, private sector.
ได้รับทราบถึงปัญหาเชื้อดื้อยาเนี่ยนะคะว่าปัจจุบันนี้ปัญหานี้เนี่ยค่ะเป็นอย่างไรบ้างคะทั้งในระดับประเทศและภูมิภาคค่ะอาจารย์
「
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you can hear me. So, yeah, so today I really very happy to see you guys today and really happy to organize this webinar. Today, the webinar is on fighting the invisible pandemic of antimicrobial resistance, AMR, really on the veterinary and One Health approach on food safety and city life. So this is with collaboration with FAO and also with FAVA. And so I really want to thank both organizations for helping to organize this, and also BNU and WAAV as well for their support. So yeah, once again, I want to extend a warm welcome to everyone here, and really happy and excited to proceed with this webinar today. And I hope that everyone will be able to learn something valuable also from Singapore's perspective and our experience, and also from the international perspective from FAO as well. So today with us, we do have a few speakers and speakers that's being lined up here as well. So yeah, so there will be, and we'll introduce them later. But if any point in time, please feel free to use the Q&A chat as well during the entire session to if you have any questions to ask as well. So yeah, so with that, I will first kick off the entire session with opening remarks by Dr. Quasar. Dr. Quasar is FAVA president, and so he's not able to join us today, but he has kindly recorded his message for us, and let's hear from him now.
Thank you, Dr. Timothy Chua, President of the Singapore Veterinary Association, for the kind introduction. Greetings to all veterinarians, farmers, and industry players in the livestock sector. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this webinar entitled Fighting the Invisible Pandemic of Antimicrobial Resistance, Veterinarians and One Health Approach on Food Safety and City Life. It is indeed an honor and privilege. The webinar is organized in collaboration with FAO, FAVA, SVA, and VNU Asia Pacific Exhibition Services in conjunction with World Antimicrobial Awareness Week 2021. I welcome the presence of Dr. Kachan Wangsata Ponchai from FAO. I'm also happy to note that we have Dr. Mary Joy Goresilo, Dr. Edmund Chu, and Dr. Yulin Chua to share their knowledge, expertise, and work. I'm sure we'll stand to gain much from this program. Ladies and gentlemen, FAVA, or the Federation of Asian Veterinary Associations, has an outreach of more than 100,000 veterinarians in the Asia, Pacific, and Oceania region. FAVA plays an important role in working with national veterinary associations to carry out programs, projects, and activities to benefit member associations. Today's program is one such collaboration we have with the Singapore Veterinary Association. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's World Antimicrobial Awareness Week is celebrated with a powerful message: spread awareness, stop resistance. The invisible pandemic of AMR, if not controlled, can cause 10 million deaths in 2050, with losses amounting to $100 trillion to the global economy. The health of people is very much connected to the health of animals and the environment. Every country must partake an active role in mitigating this global problem. Ladies and gentlemen, from the food safety standpoint, a study from an Asian country showed that E. coli isolates from chicken meat show resistance to ampicillin, tetracycline, and ciprofloxacin. Antibiotic residues and resistance were detected in 13 out of 26 samples. It was a worrisome 50% detection rate. Misuse and abuse of the antimicrobials is an important and substantial driver of AMR. A survey recently undertaken by FAVA showed that the use of ampicillin as the most common drug of choice in treating bacterial diseases in major livestock in many Asian countries. And also, it has been reported that ampicillin has shown to be the most resistant antimicrobial in humans in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Many challenges abound. Some of these are inadequate legislation, treatment guidelines may be lacking, easy access of drugs without prescription, self-administration or prescription with limited laboratory diagnostics, antimicrobials for non-therapeutic use, and withdrawal time not adhered to. Ladies and gentlemen, FAWA, being a regional organization with 27 member associations, figured that we can play an active role in combating AMR. In this regard, we have, since 2020, partnered with FAO on some collaborative work. It includes increasing the awareness on AMR by conducting national level webinar series, World Antimicrobial Awareness Farm Design Challenge, which is a regional campaign to enhance biosecurity for small to medium scale swine farmers, was also undertaken. This challenge attracted 19 entries from 7 countries in the region. The design submitted will be used as a reference for ideas in planning a biosecure farm in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we also managed to do a regional survey with 8 member countries on bacterial pathogens in major livestock and the antimicrobials used to treat the infection. The findings will be useful to obtain bulk drug combination to organize available clinical breakpoints for veterinarians. This information will be shared with member associations. We also have formed the Antimicrobial Stewardship Subcommittee and developed some activities will be undertaken with member associations on evidence-based prescription, decrease in appropriate antimicrobial usage, and the optimization of antimicrobials use. We also have developed the FAWA AMR Strategy 2021 to 2025, which states the strategies which will be undertaken by FAWA with National Veterinary Association and other partners to mitigate AMR. All these efforts, I'm sure, will help reduce the escalation of antimicrobial resistance before it's too late. The responsibility lies with us, so we have to be part of the solution. Ladies and gentlemen, lastly, I take this opportunity to thank FAO, SBA, speakers, and VNU Asia Pacific Exhibition Services to make this event happen. Thank you to all participants. I wish you all a successful webinar, and together we'll try and make a difference. Stay safe and stay healthy.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kwasa, for his opening remarks, and really thank you for Fao-Fava's support in this entire initiative towards AMR, and of course making this event a success. So for now, I would like to pass as well the time to Dr. Kashin for his opening remarks as well. So he is the Regional Manager, Emergency Center for Transboundary Animal Disease, FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So yeah, I think he might not be able to join us in person today, but again, I think he has a video for us. He will be joined by Dr. Joy, right? So yes, so Dr. Joy will be giving us the remarks on FAO behalf. Dr. Joy, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Timothy Chua, President of SDA. And of course, good afternoon, everyone, especially to the colleagues from FAWA, Dr. Acharia Sailasuta, Dr. Kwasa, who is joining us remotely from somewhere in UAE. And of course, colleagues from Singapore Food Agency, Dr. Edmund Chu, and from NParks, Dr. Jolene Chua. Good afternoon, everyone. Colleagues, veterinary colleagues from Singapore and in various countries. I'm seeing here there are different countries also joining. I see already browsing to their colleagues from Philippines, from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, China, and few others that are here. So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our Regional ECTAD Manager, Dr. Kashenwang Satapornchai, I am Mary Joy Gordancillo, was the AMR Regional Project Coordinator of FAO, to welcome everyone and to thank everyone for joining Singapore in this celebration today on World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. This is also I think the 8th or 7th World National Webinars that is part of the series of national webinars on World Antimicrobial Awareness Week that FAWA is organizing. We would like to also acknowledge not only the Singapore Veterinary Association, but also the Federation of Asian Veterinary Association, who has been tirelessly working on this day and night to reach out to veterinarians the message on antimicrobial resistance. Just being a little taking back a few years ago when I started working in the region, I returned in 2011, and I was fresh armed with excitement on antimicrobial resistance back in 2011. But back then, no one seems aware, or no one seems interested. It's not happening. The veterinary field is different. Animal management is different from humans. So it was a bit, when you're so inspired and you have a lot of ideas to bring in, and you're met with, like different perspectives on this, it is quite, it's difficult. But then a little forward to this day, you can see that there's a lot of things going on. Everybody's aware, or almost everyone is aware, and there are a lot of initiatives on mitigating antimicrobial resistance, and also a lot of organizations involved in pitching into this work. It's really a community effort in Asia, and a lot of awareness happening. I am very, very pleased that partnering with FAVA and National Veterinary Association in moving this thing forward among veterinarians. As a veterinarian myself, of course, this strikes a chord, because I think it's really inspiring that a lot of veterinarians are now stepping up and pitching into this global work to address this global public health issue. And indeed, there's a lot that as veterinarians, we could contribute to this conversation and to the initiatives that's going on, not only in Asia, but globally. The partnering with FAVA opens up a lot of opportunities for each and every veterinarian to do our contribution to doing something, from awareness to contributing to surveillance, to practicing and just promoting good practices to reduce the need for antimicrobials. And if we need to use it prudently. And lastly, on governance, to manage antimicrobial resistance at the political level and promote funding support to the initiatives that countries are doing on this front. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and I hope we're all excited to hear also what Singapore will share with us this afternoon. And I am also taking the opportunity, as you will see later, to acknowledge the really rich contributions that Singapore is doing, not only for the country, but also in the broader region. So with this, I would like to congratulate everyone, thank everyone for being here, for really stepping up and contributing to this global health issue. And happy World Antimicrobial Awareness Week to each and every one of you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. Thanks a lot for attending and contributing to the webinar, and we really look forward to hearing from you and learning from you. So I think moving forward, I think it's a short opening address by me as SVA president. So thank you everyone for coming to today's webinar. First of all, I want to thank FAVA, Dr. Kwasa, Dr. Achira, for really putting in a lot of effort to organizing this and having that initiative to work towards AMR. And of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Joy from FAO for really bringing this international perspective and the regional perspective as well, and also the strong awareness of AMR in the region. And we look forward to hearing from her to understand more about her perspective. And of course, I want to thank our speakers. Okay, so we have Dr. Edmund Chu and Dr. Julin. And so they are from SFA, Singapore Food Agency, and also AVS MParks Singapore, for really trying to bring and share with us what is Singapore's experience and initiative. And of course, lastly, I really want to thank everyone here for attending this session. It's really heartening to see colleagues from really all around the region coming together, really united in this one singular purpose, and also coming to learn from each other, experience. And so Singapore is really very honored to be part of this global movement to bring better awareness of AMR. So from our perspective, SVA, Singapore Veterinary Association, we have been trying to work very closely with the regulators and also regional partners to bring awareness. And we are very heartened that Singapore regulators, AVS and SFA, has a very strong awareness about AMR issues, and definitely a very strong initiative to push forward this awareness itself. And so we have been recently as well working very closely with them to establish guidelines on AMR. And so I will not try to steal any thunder and lightning, but I will let our speakers actually provide you more information about the guidelines that we are going to launch. And so we all know that it's really important to play an important role to ensure that we understand the importance of AMR, even in this city setting itself, such as Singapore. And that is something that we all individually have this huge responsibility to play, especially as veterinarians using antimicrobials. We are very happy as well on behalf of SVA to play this active role together with our regional partners, and especially with FAVA. So as SVA as well has participated in the subcommittee that FAVA has actually organized, and we really look forward to implementing some of these initiatives that has been proposed in the near future itself. Okay, so with that, I think I will hand the time over to Dr. Joy. So I would like to introduce her and also the topic that she's going to talk about today. So the topic that she's going to talk on is AMR mitigation in food and agriculture in Asia Pacific region, the FAO milestones, lessons, and the ways forward. And Dr. Joy is a FAO AMR project coordinator. I think many of you will be very familiar with her. And she worked at the Emergency Center for Transboundary Animal Disease Operations of FAO Regional Office for Asia and Pacific. And so part of work has been on developing tools, various strategies and solutions to mitigate antimicrobial resistance in the food and agriculture sector in Asia. So she's very well qualified and she's very enthusiastic about this topic. And so I think we really look forward to listening from her and really learning from her as well. So yeah, with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Joy to proceed with the webinar. Thanks a lot, Dr. Joy, for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Chua. Allow me to share my screen. And today, good afternoon again, colleagues. Today I'll be talking about the work of FAO in the region, and also in part share also our partners that are working with this to move this theme forward, AMR mitigation in food and agriculture in the Asia Pacific region. Let me just take a bit back on where it all started. It triggered the conversations globally when the Global Action Plan was launched at the World Health Assembly in 2015. Shortly after, the FAO Action Plan, patterned up after this Global Action Plan, was crafted specifically around the work on AMR, specifically targeting the food and agriculture sector. And recently, in light of the experiences gained and the new things that are evolving and arising, the new FAO Action Plan was launched in 2021 to 2025. So this was actually just very recently globally launched last week. And I will share in the chat box the link to the FAO Action Plan. If you have the time to take a look, you can download the new FAO Action Plan through the link that I shared in the chat box. Now, working on this action plan, what does it contain? Basically, the work entails increasing stakeholder awareness and engagement to foster change. So we're working on awareness, also in surveillance and research to support evidence-based decisions. And of course, as FAO, there's a lot of initiatives, or there's a lot of work on good practices to enable good practices in preventing infections and promoting control of antimicrobial resistance. Likewise, it's also pushing for responsible use to keep antimicrobials working in agriculture sector. And of course, by agriculture, we mean livestock, aquaculture, and also plant health. And finally, in strengthening governance and allocating resources to accelerate and sustain progress. All these pillars of work of FAO is geared towards for food and agriculture sectors and dependent livelihoods and economies to be made more resilient to the impacts of antimicrobial resistance. As you know, as FAO, we are working towards addressing, of course, improving health, not only of animals, but also of plants, and improving opportunities for those that are dependent on food and agriculture. Well, let me just walk you through each and every pillar of work that I have mentioned here. So first, increasing stakeholder awareness and engagement to foster change. We all know the importance of awareness. As I have briefly mentioned earlier, when we started working on this, there's little awareness that is out there. But then over time, we can see that things are moving along. But still, there are still a lot of work that is needed. We need to raise awareness to the key stakeholders, not only for veterinarians, but of course also for those that are related to food and agriculture, including farmers. The initiatives to increase awareness and engagement are supported and implemented in FAO, including advocacy to those that are to the decision makers. Some of the initiatives that FAO are doing are comprehensively presented in this very brief, the visual narrative of the work that we're doing in Asia. So you can see here that aside from World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, we are working with recent examples. So we're working with FAVA on a series of webinars to reach and to steer World Antimicrobial Awareness Week to a higher level. And I'm really glad that reaching out to veterinarians is one of the key focus of our WOW event this year. But in the previous years, we have been working also not only with animal health sector, but also with the tripartite. So we have, just to promote, we have an event tomorrow as a tripartite on World Antimicrobial Awareness Week celebration. So we're working a lot on this awareness individually and collectively as, following the One Health approach as well. The intention, of course, is to increase awareness and engagement to foster change. And part of the target sector, of course, not only the food and agriculture sector, but also those of the decision makers. Secondly, we're working to strengthen surveillance and research to support evidence-based actions. As you may probably be aware, FAO has a lot of work on surveillance and research, and part of this is in strengthening laboratory capacities and surveillance. So just to illustrate some of the very comprehensively, there's a lot of initiatives that are going on in Asia, particularly for surveillance, but let me just group this into these areas for developing tools for AMR surveillance strengthening. We're implementing Atlas in the region, assessment tool for laboratory AMR surveillance system. There are also tools on PMP and other tools, not only for the region, but also globally. So I'll mention some of these key tools later on. We are also trying to stimulate tools to access resources and networks such as FAO Reference Center. So we have one now that is globally recognized, FAO Reference Center for AMR at Chulalongkorn University. They are one of the first 5 FAO Reference Center to be recognized, and they have been partnering with us on this particular area. We're also working on several AMR publications, and if you look at the FAO website, there might be some publications that are of interest to you. And of course, part of the resource mobilization is the Multi-Partner Trust Fund, which is, of course, it's a tripartite initiative as well. And part of this is countries pitching into the work to support other countries. There are also tools for planning AMR surveillance, such as we have developed regional guidelines, AMR surveillance planning materials, and AMR surveillance implementation review. We're also working to support AMR data generation and management, recognizing from the Atlas missions that this is one of the gaps that we have in the region, that there are enough, there's some people already starting on generating data, but managing data, regardless of the level of advancement of the country, is still remains a gap. So we've been working on this for since last year. So we've developed some of the data management tools, such as we're working with HUNET now to revise the HUNET software to accommodate better the food and agriculture component. Likewise, we're also doing regionally customized plates that is specific to the needs of the region. And of course, part of this support is on capacity building initiatives. We also, of course, as FAO, we try and facilitate collaboration and access to expertise, such as the AMR Technical Advisory Group, working groups, and consultation platforms. We also work with the partners, FAO partners such as OIE, WHO, UNEP in formulating this access to expertise. And finally, specifically for surveillance, we're working on tools for progressive improvement and sustainability through Atlas missions and developing post-Atlas work, meaning from the findings, recommendations, we're trying to identify the gaps that are still needed by countries and facilitate addressing this through the ASCEND tool, which is what we call AMR Surveillance Capacity Enhancement Drive for this year, which started this year. So these in a capsule are the many activities that are happening towards this end on surveillance and research. Perhaps of particular interest for veterinarians, we are now working to focus more strongly on AMR surveillance in animal pathogens. As you probably will know, a majority of the work on AMR surveillance that are currently ongoing are those that link with human health. So the panel of antimicrobials are specifically for human health, because we want to know what spills over. So now FAO is also starting to work on establishing more strongly the work on capacity building for AMR antimicrobial susceptibility testing for veterinary pathogens. So again, plugging here, we will be releasing some call for interest from laboratories in the region who would like to be trained in on using the broth microdilution plates in monitoring AMR in pathogens, not just the pathogens that spill over to the food chain, but specifically for pathogens that affect or cause diseases in animals. So if you have, or if you know any laboratory that would be interested to participate, particularly those who store animal pathogens, that would be very strongly encouraged to participate in this network of animal disease diagnostic laboratories for AST. And of course, I think on the third pillar is enabling good practices to prevent infection and control on the spread of resistance of resistant microbes. So good practices intends to reduce the need for use, and it works and focuses mainly on infection prevention and control, in biosecurity, basically, to promote good practices to reduce to reduce infection, so that we do not need the unnecessary use of antimicrobials in the end. So in terms of the regional initiatives in Asia, we have been, of course, part of this are the housing design competition. We have been collating initiatives. As you know, as FAO, we have a number of guidelines on biosecurity for pigs, biosecurity for poultry, good practices, you know, in every aspect of the production system, including vaccination, including feeds. So we are trying to collate this and work on this. And of course, part of the initiative in the region specifically is Agri-WASH, what you call as Agri-IPC, or Agri-Infection Prevention and Control, and Agri-Water Sanitation and Hygiene. Interestingly, this agriculture version of IPC and WASH in the human health sector are converted tools, you know, that we're trying to adapt the same approaches for the human health sector and bringing it in the agriculturalizing it. So we're trying to convert this existing human health sector tools for the use of animal health sector. And that's the way that we are viewing this. In terms of prudent use, there are several initiatives actually that are ongoing in these areas, but basically the promotion of promotion of prudent antimicrobial use is at the fore. So some of the regional initiatives in Asia has been part of this has been on promoting antimicrobial stewardship initiatives. Very soon we will be starting the development of national treatment guidelines, and we are pulling together some resource, some expertise to help countries in developing their respective treatment guidelines for animals. We've been working on some countries, specifically to understand where are the gaps in this. Is it in legislation? Is it surveillance data? And incidentally, at the end of this talk, I will share with you a brief short questionnaire, because we've been trying to collect inputs and insights from veterinarians on what do they need, to help them practice more prudently, and also to understand what are the remaining gaps in promoting a more robust mechanism for testing or for monitoring antimicrobial resistance in our patients, in the animals that we try to address. So these are some of the existing initiatives, and we are hoping to broaden this further, because this is really, and I think this is very key for veterinarians. Together with FAVA, we're starting to have an antimicrobial stewardship platform, a subcommittee on antimicrobial stewardship, which will be subsumed under the pharmaceutical stewardship committee of FAVA. So in this way, there will be initiatives specifically targeting veterinarians in this aspect. Now, finally, in governance, this is more on a governance mechanism, and FAO is helping support this through stimulating and coordinating. So there's a lot of initiatives, discussions on this that you will see along the policy and regulatory area. So we're working on establishing AMR technical advisory groups in Southeast Asia and South Asia. We're also from this tag, we also have the technical working group and a lot of regional coordination work in laboratory and in epidemiology on AMR, so regional coordination. And soon we will also be establishing a network of laboratories for aquaculture and also for animal pathogens. So for those who are working in this area, please do not hesitate to reach out. We will be inviting through, of course, our usual government channels. So please also coordinate with your national governments in this particular topics, and so you can be, part of this work. We're also, of course, one area of strong support is through the One Health approach, and this, through the regional tripartite. So with the WHO, with OIE, and now with UNEP as well. So we have some ongoing collaborations with the group. And of course, not to forget that with FAVA, a part of this is on empowering our ongoing work on empowering veterinarians of Asia in fulfilling the roles in Global Action Plan for AMR. Part of this, as I have outlined in this series of talks, is building awareness, but specifically towards veterinarians and relevant key stakeholders such as veterinary students and veterinary clients. And secondly, on surveillance, they have helped us do the survey for the bug drug survey. They have translated the regional bug drug survey into 8 local languages, so we can generate more information and take context of what's happening on the ground at the local level. They're also help us promote, and we have recently concluded the second housing design competition, this time for swine. So this actually involved designing swine with the concept of biosecurity at the fore. So there are 3 winners identified, I think 1 from Thailand, 2 from Thailand, and 1 from Malaysia. So this has been recently concluded. As the 4th component on prudent use, they have established through this partnership the Antimicrobial Stewardship Subcommittee of FAVA. And lastly, and I think we're all excited about this, FAVA started to draft the strategy, the FAVA strategy on antimicrobial resistance. So for veterinarians, I think it would be very interesting to identify what you can contribute, what our profession can contribute to this global initiative. And I think it's very, for me, I think there's a lot of interest personally, because as a veterinarian working in this area, it inspires me to see other colleagues and other veterinarians really gathering together and building the work and pitching into this global health issue. So, of course, this is to say that this is not a one man band. It's not only FAO that's working on this, but AMR mitigation in food and agriculture is a community effort, and collaboration is key. I have to mention these are just some of the organizations that we work with. There are also a wealth of organization, also so many organizations that are pitching in the region. So these are only the ones that come on top of my head, and the ones we currently have active work in. But of course, there are more out there that are pitching into this work. But let me just highlight one very important collaborator of FAO, and just let me walk through, because we're talking about Singapore Veterinary Association here. And I think it would be remiss of me not to mention and highlight the contributions of Singapore to this regional work that we are doing. As I've mentioned, we have started the AMR Technical Advisory Group for Southeast Asia. This started in 2017, actually, and Singapore was one of the pioneering members. And if for those who might not be aware, Singapore is the ASEAN lead country on AMR, and who is bridging AMR TAG with the ASEAN Lab Directors Forum, ASEAN Sectoral Working Group on Livestock, and other platforms of ASEAN. So that has been a very key and important role for us to move forward with some of the areas of work. Now, maybe it would also be important to share here that following the initiative in Southeast Asia, AMR TAG is also now being established in South Asia and Eastern Africa, and now they are also discussing this for other regions. So it started with this first meeting in 2017, which is I would think that people see the value of working on this, and now they are replicating in other regions and even globally. So that's one important contribution from Singapore. Also, another key contribution from Singapore, as I've mentioned, FAO has been developing regional guidelines on monitoring and surveillance of antimicrobial resistance, antimicrobial use, and residues. Let me just maybe highlight, one of the highlights is that SFA and NPARKS actually co-authored the Regional Guideline Volume 3 on monitoring and surveillance of AMR in bacterial pathogens from aquaculture. This work would have not been possible, and we're now waiting for some clearances before it gets printed. So we are now at the final stages where we're waiting for this to get released, publicly released. So this has been in collaboration with the Singapore Food Agency and NPARKS. And I think this is the draft sample format, but eventually we will see also the logos of SFA and NPARKS there. Now, aside from that, they also contributed to the development of the other regional guidelines, so particularly for 1, 2, and 5. Volumes 4 and 6 are still underway and will again seek contributions, of course, from Singapore and other ASEAN member states. So their contributions and technical expertise has been very much a strong support, for the region. Another area of support is on residues. So Singapore Food Agency was part of the technical working group that contributed to address the work on residues assessment. Well, actually, let me just backtrack here. AMR TAG, the way that we're dealing with the TAG, we identify technical issues in the region that that can help advance AMR surveillance in the region, or AMR work in the region. One technical item identified is that there is a lack of assessment of country capacities on antimicrobial residue detection. And so Singapore was one of the countries that stepped up to help, and contributed to the technical working group. And from this contribution, Singapore was one of the countries that piloted the Atlas Residues for Veterinary Drugs for Food tool. So actually, this has been advancing, and this is a systematic way of assessing antimicrobial residue detection in countries. And this is now, moving towards finalization at this stage, together with the food safety, FAO food safety colleagues, unit. Another one of the contribution is addressing technical item 7. So the regional mechanism for standardized supply pool following the recommended regional antibiotic panel to complement guideline volume 1. One of the issues raised is that, well, there is a recommendation of antimicrobial panels for by the way, volume 1 refers to AMR surveillance for bacteria coming from healthy food animals. So basically the bacteria that enters the food chain. So this is the more popular AMR surveillance work in many countries because it's focused on public health. So what we did is, because this is lacking, we kind of need to have a specific tool for this. And so the design and to come up with this design takes a lot of work. But thankfully, we are not alone in this work. We have of course, the FAO Reference Center, we have OIE, we have Singapore and other countries and other experts contributing. So we developed a regionally customized broth microdilution plate for the regional indicators, the 4 organisms, Salmonella, E. coli, Enterococcus, and Campylobacter. So this is now completed. And recently, we're now approaching the finalist. I mean, it's finalized. We're just now procuring for the gram-negative bacterial pathogens for aquaculture. So that's another accomplishment, I think, with a collaboration with Singapore. And I think one other area that we are very appreciative of on the support on the implementation of assessment tool for laboratories and AMR surveillance system in the region. So Atlas is a tool that's developed globally but rolled out by region. So Singapore hosted the first regional training for Atlas assessors in May 2018 and has been part of the Atlas assessors community in Asia, which includes colleagues and representatives from SFA and NPARKS. They are part of the missions that we have been rolling out in the region. They've been part of missions in Indonesia, in Maldives, and Bhutan, in different other countries. So unfortunately, because of COVID, this work has been stalled a bit, but we will continue to work, to proceed with this work. But their inputs, they're part of the pool of assessors that are helping FAO in implementing this tool across the region. So far, we have done 15 countries since 2017. And at this point, we're just waiting for things to improve, and we'll be back rolling again on Atlas missions eventually. So one other contribution is, they're part of the FAO OIE coordination group of leading AMR institutions in Asia and the Pacific. And SFA, as an OIE collaborating center, is one of the leading AMR institutions in the region. So as you can imagine, they're part of the other FAO reference centers and OIE collaborating centers from Japan, New Zealand, and Thailand that are working to advance AMR laboratory work in the region. They actually hosted the last one that we've had in 2019. Of course, 2020 was kind of canceled altogether because of COVID, but hopefully at some point we will be able to resume, this regular meeting. We've been doing this virtually. Last year we did, but hopefully we'll be able to resume the work. But these are the laboratories that are supporting capacity building initiatives in other countries in the region. So of course, and finally, the work on as part of the work on empowering veterinarians of Asia in fulfilling their roles in Global Action Plan on AMR. Part of this collaboration with FAVA, Objective 1 of 5, is a series of national World Antimicrobial Awareness Week webinars on AMR across the region. And as you can see, Singapore Veterinary Association is one of the 10 FAVA member associations that co-hosted a national event. So that's why we are all here today for this. And thank you to SVA for this support. Some other RAP Singapore collaborations that I just lumped this in because some are, future work. We tried to collate all data so far, and they're part of the work that's contributing to the regional data analysis. And we have also been working on a regional AMR data management technical working group that has started. So these are some of the active work. And in the future, we are looking at these areas of work on the aquaculture AST laboratories, as I mentioned earlier, also on animal disease diagnostic laboratories, already mentioned, and hopefully also on good practices and antimicrobial stewardship, particularly on helping countries in developing national treatment guidelines. And of course, most importantly, as the ASEAN lead country for AMR, we're hoping that Singapore can also help, in contributing to the development of FAO ASEAN collaboration, particularly on AMR. And lastly, just to summarize on the ways forward, what are these? Why are we doing all this? So each and every pillar, national and regional initiatives on AMR mitigation in food and agriculture in the Asia Pacific region builds into each of these pillars. So whatever small activity that's happening, be it at national or sub-national level, be or at regional level, all these are moving towards addressing these outcomes and to reach this goal, that AMR levels are reduced and the emergence and spread of resistance is slowed across the food chain and for all food and agriculture sector. And of course, so that antimicrobial efficacy is preserved while sustaining food and agriculture production. These are the two major goals of the FAO Action Plan. And of course, this will only be made possible with contributions from everyone, not only as a country from Singapore, but us as individual veterinarians in the work that we do. Whatever we do, it's a small contribution that we can pitch in. So as I've mentioned, we will have a small survey. I'll post a question later in the chat box and hope you can contribute also to this question. Thank you, and a happy World Antimicrobial Awareness Week to everyone. I'll stop here and over back to you, Dr. Chua.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Joy. Yeah, it's really good sharing that you mentioned, and on behalf of Singapore, thank you for highlighting all the good works that Singapore has done, and I'm sure we will continue to put in more efforts into this into this area and spearheading this even further. Yeah, so thanks a lot for your time. I think just to share on to what Dr. Joy mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to put into the Q&A chat. I think you can see at the more or less at the bottom of your screen, it says Q&A. So please feel free to type in your questions into there, and we will take all the questions if we have time later during the panel discussion session. So yes, please feel free to use that, and we really want to hear from you and answer your questions as well. Yeah, so so I think thanks a lot, Dr. Joy. And so I think with that we will move on to the next segment of our webinar. Okay, so so the next section is really brought by Dr. Edmund Chu from Singapore Food Agency. So his topic of discussion today is on antimicrobial resistance in the food chain, AMR control strategy in Singapore. And so I think we have, Dr. Joy has already alluded to a little bit on that. So we look forward to hearing from him. Dr. Edmund Chu, just to give a little quick introduction, he is a veterinarian by training and serves currently as the Assistant Director in the Regulatory Standards and Veterinary Officer in a Singapore Food Agency. His latest portfolio includes planning, development, implementing veterinary public health programs and policy to support SFA mission to ensure and secure a supply of food, of safe food itself. And during his service itself, he had taken numerous different portfolios as well, from accreditation of overseas food establishment to importation, exportation of food products. So he has a huge interest in antimicrobial resistance and has been involved in this AMR work since 2016. So he also currently serves as a national focal point for AMR matters at ASEAN and also multiple international forums for the livestock sector. So Yes, and so we look forward to listening from him. And so without further ado, could I just invite Dr. Edmund Chu to give us his talk. Dr. Edmund Chu, please.
Okay, thanks, Timothy. Let me share my screen. Okay, so thank you very much to Dr. Mary Joy for her insightful sharing on FAO efforts and also her introduction to Singapore's collaborations with FAO. So we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work closely with FAO on such important work. And a very good afternoon from Singapore, and good morning and evening to our colleagues who are attending this webinar from other parts of the world. So my name is Edmund, and I'm a veterinarian by training from Singapore Food Agency. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to FAO, Fao-Fava-Sva-Vnu-Waaw, and VNU for organizing this very timely workshop and for the opportunity to speak and share on this important topic. So I would also like to attribute my slides to Professor Ong and Dr. Kaur from the National Center for Food Science under SFA, who have given me a great deal of help on this deck of slides I'm presenting today. So before we start, I would like to take a brief moment to introduce the Singapore Food Agency, the agency where I'm from. So we are a relatively new statutory board, which was formed on 1st April 2019 under the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, MSE for short, with the mission to ensure and secure a supply of safe food. So with the sharpened oversight over the entire food supply chain, SFA is able to strengthen Singapore food safety and supply. So SFA is the Food Safety Authority in Singapore, and we manage food safety through 3 key principles. So first, we take a farm-to-fork approach to identify key stakeholders and critical control points along the food supply chain. Second, we employ science and risk assessment to inform our risk management measures. And last but not least, we emphasize that food safety is a joint responsibility. And to this end, we focus a lot on building stakeholders' capability through regular engagements. Oops. Okay. So to support SFA's food safety work, the National Center for Food Science is the scientific arm of SFA. And this center houses the SFA's food safety laboratory testing, as well as a multidisciplinary team of scientists on research, exposure, data science, and risk assessment to support our agency's mission and vision. So besides the primary functions, one of the key deliverables of NCFS is to provide leadership in food science to strengthen the food safety ecosystem from farm to fork. So these are some of the few key domain areas that NCFS is focusing on for capability development. So with the introduction out of the way, let's now dive into the topic of AMR in food chain. So as many of you would know, AMR is a well-recognized One Health challenge because AMR microorganisms can be present in any ecological niche and can be spread from one ecological sector to another. Globally, as well as in Singapore, AMR bacteria are being monitored in different ecological sectors and has been found in food chain. So my topic today will focus on what are some of the drivers of AMR in the food chain, why AMR is a challenge within food chain with some key findings from Singapore's context, as well as how SFA is working together with our One Health, regional and international partners to address this important challenge together. So adapted from the European Food Safety Authority, this slide represents how food production setups are linked with both humans and other possible sources of AMR in a cyclical manner, hence emphasizing the importance that addressing AMR in the food sector requires a One Health approach. So first, starting from the top half of this complex diagram, today, at the global landscape, increasing food trade and increasing demand for animal source protein is aimed to be met through a shift towards intensification of food animal production systems. So these systems have, however, given rise to increase in diseases in the cultured animals and accelerates the use of antimicrobials for disease prevention, mortality rate reduction, maintain productivity, and economical sustainability of such a food system approach. So the increase in antimicrobial use driven up by intensive farming and increasing food trade exerts selection pressure for microbes, which are literally everywhere. So some microbes are biologically more capable of responding to the selection pressure than the others, and ultimately becoming antimicrobial resistant strains. And through food production chain, ARB and ARGs can be further transmitted between food and humans. So let's move to the bottom half of the diagram. So besides the antimicrobial usage within the farm, environmental resistance can be another transmission route for AMR to enter the food production system. So for instance, through the discharge effluent of wastewater treatment plants, for example, like your treated wastewater, your reclaimed water, and sewage sludge, human waste can actually lead to the contamination of surface water, soil, and air. And this surface water, soil, and airborne dust can in turn present as transmission routes of AMR to the food production environment. Other sources of contamination includes contaminated production equipment, wildlife, rodents, and arthropods. So in addition, farm workers, visitors, and companion animals may also serve as possible vehicles to introduce AMR into the food production systems. So chemical contaminants such as heavy metals and disinfectants used in the food production may also present a selection pressure for the development and transfer of AMR. So besides the farm, these also apply to the other points along the food chain, such as manufacturing and processing. And these are the overall challenges of AMR that we are currently facing in the food chain. And these challenges are certainly not exhaustive. So to continue the topic on antimicrobial use in food animals, this is a study conducted a few years ago, which estimated the total antimicrobial consumption at about 63,000 tons in livestock in 2010. And this amount is expected to continue to rise by nearly 70% by the time we reach 2030. So the study also emphasized the increasing consumer demand for animal source proteins, again linked to the intensive farming activity, is likely to be a key factor for the increase in antimicrobial consumption. Hence, this calls for global initiatives to preserve that antibiotic effectiveness and at the same time ensuring food sustainability, especially in less privileged countries. Now coming back to Singapore, this slide gives a snapshot of the antimicrobial consumption in animals and local farms based on the overall annual voluntary reported sales in these sectors. So while not truly representative, these sales figures currently provides us a proxy of the AMU status in Singapore. Moving forward, we are aiming to work with the local farmers to collect antimicrobial utilization data at the farm level, which would give us a better sense of the actual usage volume and purpose on the farms, down to the species and individual farm level. So this will hopefully allow us to come up with more targeted engagement and also a recommendation on prudent use of antimicrobials in our local farms. To drive towards positive behaviors on antimicrobial use in farming sectors, we need to first know what are the influencing factors behind this behavior. So this study by the National University of Singapore found three key factors. So first, at the individual level, the farmer's personal knowledge and experiences about the antibiotics influence their decision about antibiotic use. So some examples that was given in this study by the farmers include like farmers observing that there was impaired growth of their fish post-antibiotic treatment. They also noticed that it is futile to be feeding your antibiotics to sick fish because sick fish have a lack of appetite. And also, interestingly, in this study, it was noted that our farmers actually have the ability to discern the different treatments required for bacterial, viral, or parasitic diseases. And they have an understanding that antibiotics don't work for viral diseases, etc. So second, in terms of the regulatory environment, the study found that regulatory oversight from the authorities actually play a very important role in deterring the overuse of antimicrobials. So the farmers actually mentioned about how the regulatory environment led to increasing awareness about the chemicals that the farmers use. So this finding actually validates the importance of the initiatives and efforts undertaken by the authorities, SFA and MPARCS, in regulation of the antimicrobial use on farm. And third and last, at the economic level, the relatively high price of antibiotics in Singapore and stiff competition from the neighboring countries were a strong disincentive for the local farmers to use antimicrobials. So in addition, investors and export requirement about being antibiotic free in their products and consumers' awareness also play an important role in deterring antibiotic overuse in local farming practice. So in addition, through the thematic analysis of the participants, mainly the farmers' interviews, the study also showed that antibiotic for growth promotion and infection prevention was uncommon among local food fish farmers. So besides antimicrobials, the roles of non-antimicrobials have been scientifically discussed as a driver of AMR. And in food production, especially in today's increasingly elongated and complex food supply chain, bacteria are subjected to several food chain related stresses. For example, during food production, processing, transport, and storage. And these stresses can be physical, can be chemical or biological in nature. And some studies have actually showed that there are associations between the use of these infectants and AMR in food. Also, natural environmental contaminants such as heavy metals are also found to have some association with AMR in seafood. Farming environment can also play an important role in the epidemiology of AMR. A study by the National University of Singapore, NUS, found high concentrations of ARG and multi-drug resistant E. coli in the surface waters of local aquatic farms and transect. The study hypothesized that wastewater or animal discharge from the agricultural runoff could be polluting sources. And the study hence emphasized the importance of limiting antimicrobial use in the feed, and also a need for improved monitoring of microbial water quality in the local aquatic system to address AMR in aquaculture. So besides food production and farming environment, a local study found ARG and multi-drug resistant E. coli in wild birds and also rodents droppings. And these can be considered as part of the environmental resistance. And these findings highlight the importance of close monitoring of AMR in potential reservoirs that may come in contact with the food chain as part of the larger environment. And in addition, the findings also highlight the importance of food and farm environment management, including proper food waste disposal. For example, there's a need to avoid attracting the rodents and the wild birds which have greater mobility, and because these can be actually vehicle carrying the AMR determinants from one location to another, facilitating the crossover between the ecological sectors. Hence, the food waste disposal management could contribute to reducing the spreading of AMR through the potential vehicles. Besides all these anthropogenic and environmental factors, AMR can be accelerated by climate change. In fact, every 10 degrees Celsius increase could lead to about 4% in increase in AMR infection. And this is largely due to the fact that warmer weather can accelerate bacterial or pathogen growth and mutations, and hence may generate more antimicrobial resistant infections. So by now, we can all agree that AMR is a One Health challenge, but we don't just see it as a problem, right? Starting from the lower left-hand corner, we start with the threat. We have a constant threat of emerging hazards through food trade. And we just discussed about how climate change could also accelerate AMR. In terms of weakness, as a gap, I think we do need a dedicated biosurveillance system that focuses on AMR and AMU. But we do have a lot of strengths as well. Singapore continues to uphold its food safety standards and systems, which in a way actually helps to address the AMR problem from the hygiene and infection control viewpoint. In Singapore, we also have a very strong intersectorial One Health framework, as well as good laboratory capacities and capabilities. And last but not least, we also see AMR as an opportunity. we are trying to take this opportunity to build our data, science, and tech capabilities, as well as stronger regional and international partnership. So in the next slides, I will share some of SFA's efforts to contribute to the larger National Strategic Action Plan to address AMR. So the Singapore National Strategic Action Plan was established by the respective One Health agencies back in 2017 and aims to address AMR through a One Health approach, building on the 5 key strategies as listed on the left-hand side of this slide. SFA works closely with the local farmers to ensure prudent and responsible use of antimicrobials. For example, SFA issues a legal directive to our farms which contain a list of banned drugs, and farms are prohibited from using antimicrobials for growth promotion. In addition, farmers are to seek veterinary treatment, veterinary advice before commencing any treatment on their farm. In addition, we educate local farmers to implement good animal husbandry practices for animal disease prevention so that they would not even need to use antimicrobials at the first place to begin with. And through our National Food Safety Monitoring Program, SFA monitors for foodborne pathogens such as Salmonella at different points in the food chain, for example, in our local farms and also in our imported food. So these isolates obtained are subsequently subjected to antimicrobial susceptibility testing for establishing the prevalence of AMR to help us understand the baseline magnitude of the AMR that we are having at the food chain. Besides foodborne pathogens, we have also recently started to monitor ESBL E. coli as an AMR indicator across the food chain. And we also started to include monitoring at the retail level, which is closer to the consumer for better exposure assessment. So in this study, nearly 30% of the retail raw meat were found with ESBL producing E. coli. And the positive rates were higher in the wet market than supermarkets. And this suggests actually that the retail process, as well as the storage conditions, may have impact to the proliferation of AMR microbes. Besides monitoring for trend at the different points of the food chain, we are also monitoring the positive rates in different sample categories across various countries. Such information are useful for our risk profiling to identify higher priority sample category as well as country of origin as part of our development of a science-based and risk-based AMR surveillance sampling plan in food chain. So these information are also useful for exchange with the industry and our competent overseas authorities to increase awareness. So in addition to conventional methods, we also started to look into applying genomic tools to study AMR. And with both phenotypic and genotypic characterization, we believe this will allow us to better understand the underlying mechanism of AMR development of the foodborne bacteria, as well as to provide more molecular epidemiology, such as the sequence type, the phylogenetic relationship, for better tracking of the source and also the transmission of AMR in the food chain. There's really quite a bit of work going on when it comes to the surveillance for AMR in the food chain. SFA is certainly not starting from scratch in terms of our current understanding in this area. And in establishing our science and risk-based AMR surveillance program, SFA leverages on many past published studies and consistently keep ourselves abreast of new developments in this area. So all these studies actually help us to define the magnitude of the AMR to an extent and help inform our food chain surveillance system. So this is a snapshot of our SFA's food chain AMR surveillance program. Our program is supported by our National Reinvestment Funding mechanism to strengthen our surveillance capabilities and data collection through our risk-based sampling plan across the food chain. And as part of the One Health approach across the relevant agencies involved in Singapore's National Strategic Action Plan on AMR, the agencies have also identified several priority areas of AMR research. For example, deepening our understanding on the transmission pathways of key AMR pathogens and also assessing the socio-economic impact of AMR. We also work very closely with both local and overseas institutes of higher learnings on AMR work. Our SFA's AMR surveillance program covers 4 key aspects. Right. So active and passive surveillance of foodborne bacteria coming through specific AMR sampling program, as well as through our National Food Safety Monitoring Program. In addition to phenotypic testing, we are also embarking on our 100K genome monitoring project to sequence targeted foodborne bacteria from food, animals, and humans. So to this, we are already working with various hospitals, One Health partners, and institutes of higher learnings. And last but not least, we are urgently building our data and exposure science capabilities, which we believe this will add value to our AMR surveillance program for sense making of the data to support subsequent risk management measures in addressing the AMR issue in time to come. In addition to being data-driven, we are mindful that addressing AMR requires a multi-pronged approach. We need to use the data and convey these findings in our message to relevant stakeholders, including the public, to increase stakeholders' awareness of AMR. We currently have a dedicated section on AMR on our SFA's official web pages. In addition to the web page, we also leverage on international events such as the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, like this week, to reiterate our messaging on AMR. SFA also collaborates with tertiary institutes and even primary school to include AMR topics in related programs, to train up our future professionals. And in addition to our domestic efforts, SFA has done quite a bit of work on the international front to combat AMR. In ASEAN, Singapore leads for AMR initiatives for livestock and aquaculture sectors. This gives us the opportunity to help drive efforts to strengthen the regional capabilities. SFA coordinates efforts within the region and have led the development of regional guidelines on antimicrobial use in food-producing animals. The most recent one being the guideline on the use of antimicrobials in aquaculture. SFA also builds capabilities in the region by sharing technical expertise and experience with other countries, such as conducting regional training workshops for antibiotic residues testing. So as shared also by Dr. Mary Joy earlier, SFA works very closely with FAO on multiple AMR initiatives, for example, the drafting of chapters on surveillance guidelines for livestock and aquaculture. And most recently, SFA, as part of One Health, supported Minister Grace Fu's participation as a member of the newly established One Health Global Leaders Group on Antimicrobial Resistance. The group was established in 2020, which aims to catalyze and strengthen global political action and momentum on antimicrobial resistance. So these are some of the guidelines and action plans we have worked with in the recent years with our regional and international counterparts. These guidelines are important because these will serve as the foundation for surveillance systems for the regional countries. So taking this chance, SFA would like to thank our One Health partners, local and overseas collaborators, including FAO, for working together with us to address AMR. And to quote FAO Director General, Dr. Qu Dongyu, during one of his Global Leaders Group meetings, where he said that AMR is a slow motion pandemic with significant long-term threats to public health and food security, which needs multi-stakeholders engagement. So WHO has also declared AMR as one of the top 10 global public health threats facing humanity. So unlike the COVID-19 crisis, which hits the world at unprecedented pace, AMR is at the scale of a pandemic, but happening slowly. Addressing AMR cannot be done alone in silo, and the One Health approach is very, very much needed, and we need to do this together. So with that, I end my sharing. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Edmund Chu, for your talk, and it's really insightful, and a lot of science that's involved. I think everyone here is have really learned a lot from SFA's experience, and yeah, so thanks a lot for sharing, and we really look forward to the panel discussion later. Yeah, so moving on, before we move on as well, I would just like to again take this opportunity to, get everyone to put up your questions on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I already saw a couple of questions, and so please feel free to submit more questions along the way. And we'll address them as well later at the panel discussion. Okay, so moving on, we go on to the next topic of the day, and that is a talk by Dr. Julin Chua. And so her talk is on One Health and the City, on AMR, on One Health approach and the city life. Okay, so Dr. Julin Chua is actually from the NParks AVS, which is Animal and Veterinary Service of Singapore. It's a cluster of the National Parks Board and Parks. So before joining NParks, she worked as a small animal general practitioner for about 7 years. So she's currently involved in animal health policy and legislative work in AVS and NParks itself. And it's also part of the One Health AMR working group as well. So without further ado, let's invite Dr. Julin Chua to give us a talk.
Thank you, Dr. Tipti. I'll just share my screen. Okay, hope you can see that. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you have been enjoying the engaging and informative talk so far. Before I start, I would just like to thank FAVA, FAO, SVA, and BNU for the tremendous effort in organizing this webinar and giving us the opportunity to share on this platform. My talk today is One Health in the City, which will be about NParks' perspective on Singapore's One Health approach to AMR. The city aspect of this comes from Singapore's urban living setting with a growing population of pets and the close interactions that we have with our companion animals. In the next few slides, I'll be sharing a brief overview of what NParks does and our vision of a city in nature, especially for our friends from overseas. Then I will explain more about Singapore's One Health approach to AMR, our national strategic action plan, and our recently launched Antimicrobial Prudent Use Guidelines for companion animals. Okay, so first, a bit of background about NParks and its vision, especially the concept of transforming Singapore into a city in nature. This concept is to ensure our continued livability, sustainability, and well-being in the face of certain challenges that we face today, such as growing urban infrastructure and climate change. Through the 5 strategies listed, as you can see, NParks aims to restore nature back to the city and apply more nature-based solutions that will help us achieve climate, ecological, and social resilience. So these are just some photos showing some examples of the activities that we have under those 5 strategies. The photos at the top show examples of vulnerable and critically endangered species that NParks is working with our partners and the community to protect and recover. And the photos below exemplify our efforts to restore nature into the urban landscape and also bring greenery closer to the everyday lives of people. One of the 5 strategies is to enhance veterinary care and animal management. The Animal and Veterinary Service is a cluster within NParks that is the main touch point on animal and veterinary matters, including animal health and welfare. Singapore remains free from animal diseases of economic and public health importance, such as rabies and avian influenza, and we work closely with our counterparts in human health, food safety, and water and environmental safety. So this brings us to the concept of One Health, which recognizes that animal, human, and environmental health are intrinsically intertwined and interdependent, and a collaborative, multi-sectoral, and transdisciplinary approach is needed when addressing concerns in these areas. One such concern of importance is AMR, and globally much has been and is beginning to be done to combat this unseen threat. International organizations like the OIE WHO and FAO have achieved a lot in bringing AMR to the forefront and providing valuable guidance and resources to individual countries. Many countries have launched national programs and plans, including Singapore. Over here, we have several agencies overseeing the various health sectors, and the AMR Coordinating Office, or MRCO, harmonizes efforts in the different sectors. Outside of these agencies, the relevant industries also play an essential role, as does our collaboration with international partners. Clinicians would be familiar with these presentations in practice. On a daily basis, vets will encounter infections of various severities and involving different body systems, such as pyodermas, abscesses, and pyelonephritis. While many cases will respond to empirical antibiotic treatment currently, with the spread of AMR, it will become increasingly common to see inadequate resolution of these cases with first-line antibiotics. This diagram illustrates the complex interplay of AMR across various sectors, settings, and even species, which all highlights the need for a One Health approach to be able to successfully tackle this issue. Okay, this is an overview of Singapore's National Strategic Action Plan on AMR, which was published in 2017. The agencies that implement this action plan are the Ministry of Health and the Health Promotion Board, which represent the human health sector, our National Water Agency, PUB, and the National Environment Agency, representing environmental and water safety, the Singapore Food Agency for Food Safety, and MPARKS, which represents animal health. The aim of this plan is to reduce the emergence and prevent the spread of AMR organisms through 5 strategies: education, research, surveillance and risk analysis, infection prevention and control, and also optimizing antimicrobial use. MPARKS implements the 5 strategies mentioned earlier in the animal health sector, and these are some examples of what we do. Firstly, AMR biosurveillance. We monitor several bacterial species in multiple animal groups, including bacteria of public health significance or that are ubiquitous. In local poultry and ruminant farms, we monitor the AMR profile of Salmonella species and E. coli. In companion animals, we monitor E. coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus or MRSA, and methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus pseudointermedius or MRSP. And in wildlife species such as in wild boar and Sambadia, we have been monitoring AMR in E. coli. So biosurveillance helps us to establish baselines for assessing trends over time, and also allows for early detection of multi-drug resistant strains, and contributes to joint AMR data analytics and risk analysis with our other One Health agencies. Secondly, veterinary antimicrobials. Some of the aspects that MPARKS has been working on are the supply and distribution of veterinary antimicrobials and their quality, safety, and efficacy, as well as their prudent use, which will be explained further later on in the talk. And last, engagement and awareness. We also work on improving the knowledge, attitudes, and practices in animal industries such as pet shops and breeders, the general public, especially pet owners, and the veterinary profession. We do this on various platforms to try to increase the reach of our messages, such as social media posts and newspaper columns, online webinars for pet owners, putting up educational posters at pet events, and also publishing articles in our newsletters to the vets. We highlight key topics such as the importance of biosecurity and infection prevention and control in animal group settings, and regular vaccination. Last year, we collaborated with the Singapore Veterinary Association, SVA, to launch the Singapore Vaccination Guidelines for Dogs and Cats to harmonize and improve vaccination practices across the country. Okay, so this year, we have worked closely with the SVA again, to publish guidelines for the prudent use of antimicrobials in companion animals. Companion animals are the target group for these guidelines for a few reasons. Humans share a close bond with pets, and the close physical contact increases the risk of transmission of AMR microbes. The shared living space and close proximity also present opportunities for indirect transmission between humans, animals, and the environment. Our pets have also shown similar fecal microbial phylogeny, increasing the risk of them serving as reservoirs for AMR genes. And the guidelines for companion animals are especially relevant given the increase in pet ownership in our country recently. In 2019, there were about 70,000 licensed pet dogs in Singapore, which was a 13% increase from just 4 years ago in 2015. These are some of the findings from our AMR biosurveillance in companion animals. We study MRSA and MRSP specifically for a few reasons. MRSA and MRSP are increasingly found in companion animals and humans respectively, which may be due to transmission between pet owners and pets. MRSA and MRSP are also often multi-drug resistant, or MDR, meaning they're resistant to 3 or more classes of antibiotics. They carry the MAC-A gene that is responsible for methicillin resistance and confers reduced affinity for beta-lactam antimicrobials. There could also be possible AMR gene transfer that could boost their spreading. In 2018 and 2019, we isolated 53 Staphylococcus species from local sick companion animals. 1 isolate was MRSA and 12 isolates were MRSP. We also found that all MRSA and MRSP isolated were MDR. Furthermore, they had high resistance rates to many of the antibiotics tested. And these results corroborated with the findings from a local paper by Hatantio in 2018 that examined diagnostic reports from a vet clinic in Singapore. These findings may show that there is a possible risk to public health with the potential transmission of AMR bacteria between pets and pet owners, or AMR gene transfer. However, these MRSA and MRSP were isolated from sick companion animals in Singapore, and the prevalence of MRSA and MRSP in local companion animals overall is not known at present, although we will continue to monitor and study this. Nonetheless, as we know that the misuse and overuse of antibiotics globally contributes to AMR emergence and spread, we recognize the importance of having updated and evidence-backed guidelines locally for the use of antimicrobials in companion animals. These are findings from our annual survey of antimicrobial sales locally from 2015 to 2019. Each year, we contact pharmaceutical wholesaler companies in Singapore to ask for their sales records to put together this data. In figure 1 on the left, overall antimicrobial sales has generally risen at a steady rate because the number of wholesalers submitting their sales records have increased, as seen by the orange dotted line, and because of our increasing animal population and production over the years. Most of the sales are to the aquaculture industry, demonstrated by the blue bar, as the aquaculture industry makes up a substantial portion of our farming sector. In figure 2 on the right, we have extracted the antimicrobial sales to the companion animal sector, which has generally remained steady over the years, except for an increase 1 year in 2017. So this overall steady trend is despite the growing population of companion animals, and overall this seems to be an optimistic trend, and we aim to continue our efforts to sustain the judicious use of antimicrobials in the animal sector. There are 4 objectives of responsible and prudent use of antimicrobials in animals. 1 is ensuring the rational use of antimicrobial agents with the purpose of optimizing both their efficacy and safety. 2, complying with the ethical obligation and need to keep animals in good health and ensuring their welfare. 3, contributing to the maintenance of the efficacy and usefulness of antimicrobial agents used in animal and human medicine. And 4, preventing or reducing the transfer of resistant microorganisms or resistance determinants within animal populations, the environment, and between animals and humans. One way that we aim to improve and encourage the prudent use of antimicrobials in companion animals is through the publishing of a set of guidelines. The guidelines were developed by the Prudent Use Working Group, comprising 14 veterinarians from the Singapore Veterinary Association and the Animal and Veterinary Service of NPARKS. The working group members come from a range of backgrounds, from general practice, veterinarians with substantial clinical experience in working with small animals and exotic species, as well as government veterinarians experienced in animal and public health, ecology, and the surveillance and epidemiology of AMR. The guidelines are based on available international guidelines in scientific journals and was developed in consultation with local veterinary specialists in various fields such as small animal surgery and members of the Singapore Veterinary Association. They contain recommendations mainly for cats and dogs, but also including pocket pets and aquatic animals. The guidelines were released a few days ago on our website and on the SVA's website, just in time for World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. And we will also be updating the guidelines regularly as and when new developments and evidence arise. Okay, these are the topics that are covered in the guidelines. The bulk of the guidelines covers prescribing practices, especially explaining the rationales for antimicrobial use and targeted treatments in patients. There are also recommendations on first-line antimicrobial choices for different common conditions that are encountered in practice, which are based on best practices, as well as appropriate diagnostic testing to consider in patient management. The guidelines also serve as an avenue for professional education, providing up-to-date data on the local prevalence of AMR pathogens. It also includes guidance on antimicrobial stewardship and the development of practical and sustainable stewardship programs for different veterinary clinical settings. There's also public health information, such as strategies on improving clinical management of patients and information relating to the spread of AMR within clinics. And lastly, we recognize that an important aspect of prudent use comes from the end user. And in Singapore's setting, this is typically pet owners or vet clinic clients. There are therefore useful client education tools provided in the document, covering things such as patient care at home and effective client communication strategies to help increase compliance when it comes to treatment. Within the guidelines, we have highlighted some key principles for clinicians when it comes to prudent use and prescribing. First, choosing the most appropriate drug and using the shortest effective period and lowest effective dose, and administering using the most appropriate route. This requires some knowledge of the pharmacological properties of antibiotics, as well as some microbiological and infectious disease knowledge. Second, base antibiotic choices on culture and sensitivity testing results where possible. And where this is not practical or feasible, then base them on the most likely pathogen for that patient's condition, as well as any available susceptibility profiles. Next, avoid empirical use of critically important antimicrobials or CIAs without justification or without doing culture and sensitivity testing. In the guidelines, we explained what are CIAs in human and veterinary medicine as prescribed by the WHO and OIE, and they include drugs like third and fourth generation cephalosporins, fluoroquinolones, and aminoglycosides. Additionally, combination or four-quadrant therapy should be avoided unless there is a life-threatening infection present. Clinicians should also regularly review antibiotic therapies and consider de-escalation whenever possible. For example, reducing the number of antibiotics used in a patient or reducing the spectrum of antimicrobial choices. Antibiotics should also be discontinued when the infection is eliminated or an alternative diagnosis has been made. Finally, clinicians are encouraged to implement infection control measures in their practice setting, such as good hygiene and biosecurity and antimicrobial stewardship programs, or ASPs. These ASPs can be implemented in a tiered or phased approach, starting out from a smaller scale and manageable plan, and then expanding to include more measures and KPIs when feasible. These are links to some of the resources that I've mentioned earlier, including our National Strategic Action Plan on AMR, One Health Joint Surveillance Report on AMR and antimicrobial utilization, and also our recently launched guidelines on the prudent use of antimicrobials in companion animals. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you for your time and for your attention.
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dr. Julin, for very informative talk about the city life and how the EVS is actually dealing with AMR. Yeah. So I think for now, I guess so. The next item on the schedule is actually a panel discussion, or rather, it's also like a Q&A session as well for all of us, all the speakers to answer any questions that you have. So yeah, I think we'll have to invite all the speakers up again to answer any questions. Okay, all right. Okay, so yeah, okay, so let me just look at the Q&A chat as well. So at any point in time, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to use the Q&A chat as well to post your question. So, okay, so I think we have a few questions. Maybe we'll take it from the top down. Okay, so there are a couple of questions by Joseph. Yeah, so thanks a lot for your question. And the first question is directed to Edmund. His question is about climate change in Philippines and how it kind of relates to the rapid change in temperatures, and I guess also relates to probably AMR. So I think that's probably where the question is going towards. Yeah, so maybe Edmund, you can
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll try to have a go at Joseph's question. So, Joseph, I'm trying to understand your question, but I believe it's in relation to one of my slides that's regarding the change in the climate change in terms of the temperature and the subsequent impact on AMR infection. So, in that study that I presented, they noticed that when the temperature increased, then the risk of, the prevalence of the AMR infection increases. But I think your question is relating to the other way, which is if there is a drop in temperature, like in terms of cold weather, what will happen to the AMR infection? Is that a question, Joseph? But anyway, if that's the question, we can't actually translate that study in reverse. So for example, what they're trying to show here, or they have established here, is that every 10 degrees Celsius increase in the temperature relates to a 4% increase in the AMR infection. But I don't think there was a corresponding study that shows that what happens when the temperature drops. Yeah. So I hope I addressed your question there. Yeah, back to you, Tim.
All right. Okay. Yes. So, yeah, I think I have a feeling the participants can't actually.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so.
No worries. No worries. Yeah.
Joseph, if you want to clarify further, you can always use the Q&A session. That's Q&A chat to actually do that. Okay. So another question from Kitty is basically, from the data, it looks like aqua products is more contaminated than chicken or pork. That's, I guess, is an open.
Okay.
Yeah. So Edmund, I think it's back to you again.
Yes. Okay. So again, I think Kitty's question will be more relating to the slide that was on the environmental contamination that was observed in our agriculture environment. But that study was specific to the environment contamination. It doesn't directly translate to AMR or pathogens being observed in the aquaculture products. So in a way, we can't make that comparison. Whereas our surveillance program actually currently focuses more on the chicken and the pork. No, I think more on the chicken surveillance in terms of Salmonella and as well as E. coli. So we're not exactly comparing apple to apple. So it's difficult to make a comparison with the whatever information that we have. But that being said, because of what we observe in the environmental contamination in terms of our agriculture environment for our farms, that's something that we are going to be focusing a lot more to see how that translates to food safety for the final food products that's coming from our agriculture farms. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So there's another question from Joseph again about implementing registration of pet animals and prevention of strays in Philippines. I know this is not entirely related to AMR, but maybe Julian, you could give it a shot to maybe look at how Singapore actually do the registration for pet animals and the stray efforts kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good question. I guess with the issue of population management, stray cats and dogs, there are usually multiple or multi-pronged approaches to that issue, starting from things like responsible pet ownership, encouraging or raising awareness on what constitutes pet ownership and the responsibilities that people should have before they decide to care for pets. And with that also, with education and raising awareness, then there is also regulation and enforcement approaches. So over here in Singapore, the licensing of pet dogs is mandatory, and if there are unlicensed pet dogs, then enforcement action can be taken. So yeah, I think it's a combination of approaches usually, and I think there's really just not one size fits all answer.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that answer. So I actually wanted to ask Dr. Joy as well, right, about something about FAO. You know, what are some of these challenges that FAO faces in Asia Pacific region as compared to other regions in the world itself? Is there anything unique in terms of AMR efforts and how we tackle AMR? Is there something unique that you think only our region actually faces in Asia itself?
Well, when you think about it, the concentration of the population, centralized in Asia, in that very tiny circle, exceeds the rest of the world. So I guess by volume, by itself is an issue as well. But I think in terms of AMR in particular, this is of course the main driver. So we have a number of animals, a lot of developing countries. And maybe the challenging part also is the disparities, we are at different levels of, progress. So there are advanced countries that are fairly advanced. There are countries that are, fairly behind. But what I can say probably is an asset of Asia. I think there's that sense of community somehow, like that people are, countries are helping other countries. And we can see this as an example, for ASEAN itself, we can see the leadership of Singapore. We have SARC in South Asia, there's SBC in the Pacific. And I think generally there's that keen interest, and there are a lot of contributions coming from different areas. For example, researchers trying to pitch in, like veterinarians trying to contribute, medical doctors trying. I think it's a matter of harnessing all these interests in a one organized, harmonized platform, so it builds on each other, not overlap or not, so it's more of like a, sorry, let me just some phone-in question coming in, but anyhow, I think there's a need, because we're a big population, there's a lot of initiatives, there's a lot of strong interest, and so there's a need to organize, coordinate, better coordination and better linkages, so that we build on each other's work. So I think that's probably the challenge for Asia, but we're there somehow. We're there's a lot of progress made in the last few years.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Just a reminder, there's no online call to the speakers directly. You have to write into the Q&A chat. Okay, if you have any questions. Okay. So the next question that we have is from Armando. Okay, addressing to Dr. Julene as well. Okay, so I think he's asking about addressing the availability of pet products intended for skin lesion where antibiotics is incorporated in the preparation and ear drops as well. Yeah, so yeah, how can we address the availability of such products that is really intended where there's antibiotics that's being used? I guess his question, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is about how do we control those products with antibiotics, and how we can reduce or how can we use it appropriately? I think that's what he's trying to ask. So Julian, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Armando. On the issue of over-the-counter products that can be found in pet shops, or that are sometimes given to pet owners when they purchase pets as well. And this is something that we've received feedback about as over the years recently, and it's something that we are trying to address. So we are currently reviewing our regulations of products for pets, including health products used in animals, especially those that contain active ingredients such as antibiotics. And this is one way that we are trying to reduce things like these. And also at the other level, owners and pet owners, we're trying to raise awareness that antimicrobial use comes with certain consequences and effects. So firstly, some products that they may get over the counter may not be necessary or may not be indicated for their pets. So one thing we're trying to raise awareness about is that products that are used in pets should be under a veterinarian's assessment and recommendation. Yeah, so this is a very good question, and something that we're looking at.
All right. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's also another question by Philip on the publicity, right? Excessive publicity by big pharma companies on antimicrobial use, and is there anything that is being done to sort of reduce that, or is that a cause as well of the over excessive use of antimicrobial? I think so. I don't know whether maybe Dr. Joy, you could answer that as well about whether do you see that regionally as something as a phenomenon that big pharmas actually use a lot of this publicity for antimicrobials and therefore acting as a contributing factor, right, to AMR, or is it something that is not really something that
Yeah, I think we have to also understand that, because it's it's business, it's driven by a private good, driven by private interest, and we have to somehow see that from that perspective. And us who are working from the government side, from international side, we're kind of the voice. Global public good is our vision. So I think we need to strike a balance between keeping private interest and the global public good, and they have to be somehow work together, because we cannot just suppress the initiative, that what people are doing
because like there will be needed to have like legislation, proper channels, proper proper rules, proper governance. But I think one thing that we can start on at the beginning would be engaging, of course, the private sectors that are doing this, and very importantly, equipping our veterinarians to be the judge. Like not to be not to be carried away by the number of colors on the brochures, or how pretty the brochures look like, or how nice the promotion is. We have to be the science, at the forefront of science, where we judge based on what we are trained for, and this is making the right calls, for this, that in spite of all the fanciness that surrounds us, we know by our training we are well equipped to make judgments on right, correct, evidence-based calls, for the decisions that we have to make. And of course, on the other side also, the government has to give the authority to veterinarians to recognize that, like as Dr. Chua mentioned, that veterinary prescription has to be driven by prescription, and it's our responsibility as veterinarians to train, to really be trained enough, and then be more knowledgeable and continue to grow in our profession by knowing and learning more when it comes to antimicrobial use. So
I guess that makes that brings us to one of the big pillars about tackling AMR, about education, right? And it starts with the vet, and I guess that's why we are doing this today, and this whole week of various engagement programs, right? So yeah, really useful that answer. I think that's really important. So I guess going on to maybe a little bit about SFA, right? So I think, Emma, you mentioned a little bit about weaknesses that there's this slide on the SWOT analysis, right? One of the weaknesses is about surveillance program. So maybe could you walk us through a little bit about what SFA plans to do in terms of implementing some sort of surveillance program? I think that's probably one of the most challenging thing for Singapore, I guess, and also for the region, I suppose.
Yeah, so thank you, Tim, for the question. So as shared earlier, I think the food supply chain is becoming increasingly elongated and complex, right? And there are many points in such a supply chain, right? For example, production, packing, transporting, and storage, etc., where contamination can occur. And there are also multiple sources of the non-food related factors, right, such as the environment, which can increase the challenge of reducing AMR in the food chain. So basically, there are just way too many variables, and you're right, it's a very big challenge when it comes to our surveillance or for AMR in food. And even though we have our surveillance program in place, it's not exactly perfect at the moment. There are a lot of areas that we know we need to improve. There are a lot more areas that we know we need to expand. And in order to do all this, we hope to write on some of our risk assessment, as well as some of the up and coming research studies as published, so that we can justify our surveillance program, not just based on what we feel, but based on science and risk assessment. And with that kind of context that there's too many variables to control in the food supply chain, we have to then focus on areas where we are able to control more effectively. So for example, upstream at the production. And to this end, like for example, we are putting in a lot of efforts to ensure that prudent antimicrobial use on our farms are complied to. But there are still limitations, right, given the demographics of our farms in Singapore. So we have older farmers who may not have up-to-date knowledge on farming practices, and these farmers are also usually more of a smaller scale in terms of their holdings, right? So there are some that they may not even understand the concept of AMR as well as its potential impact. And this is a very big challenge that has to be approached very carefully using multiple approaches. And for this situation, we're trying to improve through the release of easy to understand guidelines and documents, in addition to very regular engagements with the farmers. And our efforts on AMR prevention also wouldn't work well if we only focus on upstream, right? Upstream of the supply chain. We also need to address the other spectrum of the food supply chain too, right, at the consumer's end. And this reinforces the importance of SFA's work to ensure food safety by reiterating to our consumers that they need to ensure that they have good safe food practices and observe good personal hygiene to prevent the exposure to pathogens and drug-resistant organisms in the food in the first place. And again, to reiterate, addressing AMR is not the job of any specific sector. It's definitely not just the job of SFA in Singapore, and it just simply cannot be done in silo. And the One Health approach is very much needed, and the efforts have to be both ground up and also from top down, right? And the only way for this to work is actually for all of us to work together, right?
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's definitely a One Health approach. We can't do it alone, but yeah, definitely a lot more education has to be done on multiple fronts. Yeah, there's another question for you again. Is there any random AMR tests being conducted for processed food or meat, dairy products entering Singapore? And this is a question from Amando as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Amando, for that question. We do have a very comprehensive surveillance program for our imported food, and that includes your processed food as well as your meat and dairy products. But in terms of the AMR testing, we are not actually expanding our AMR surveillance to all types of foods, but it depends on what's actually being detected. So for example, if we do see a rising trend in, say, certain pathogen, right, detected in such food product categories, that actually will spark us internally on whether we need to step up on our AMR surveillance in this area. So we base our AMR surveillance based on the positive detection of the pathogen first. And we look at, like, for example, compliance history, etc. So it's not exactly random per se, but we're trying to cover we're trying to cast our net as wide as we can. Yeah, based on whatever available information we have.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Edmund, for that answer. Yeah, so I think we kind of covered more or less all the questions on the Q&A chat. Yeah, so I don't know whether there's anyone else who wants to ask any other questions. So, but I think, yeah, we are more or less done with the Q&A. So, yeah, so with that, I think we could possibly move on to the next section, which is just a closing. But thanks a lot for Dr. Joy, Dr. Julian, and Dr. Edmund for your time today, this afternoon, and your enthusiasm about AMR and how to tackle it, and definitely sharing it with all of us in the audience. And so personally, I learned a lot because even though I'm from Singapore, but a lot of things that SFA and NParks do, we might not actually know in full scale. And also what FAA do in the region, I think that's really incredible. So thanks a lot for all your efforts, and yeah, happy, thanks for the entire awareness week. So I hope through this awareness week, we will all be more aware of AMR and its potential issues and how we can deal with it. Yeah, so with that, I think I will hand the time over to Dr. Acharya so that she can give a closing session. Yeah, Dr. Acharya is the director of the Fao-Fava office, Bangkok. So thanks a lot. Over to you.
Thank you very much. สวัสดีค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ from the Fao-Fava office, Bangkok. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It's really very interesting and very nice. I can say that it is such a very nice webinar today. On this occasion, may I specially express our sincerest greeting again to Dr. Timothy Chua, President of the Singapore Veterinary Association, SVA, our co-hosting of the webinar today. As the director of the Fao-Fava office, Bangkok, and the coordinator of the FAO, Fao-Fava Collaborative Project, on World Antimicrobial Awareness Week 2021, it has been an honor for me to co-host with Singapore Veterinary Association on holding the FAO Fao-Fava-Sva-Vnu-Waaw webinar in celebration Wow 2021 with the technical support from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in the theme of fighting the invisible pandemic of antimicrobial resistance, veterinarians, and the One Health approach on food safety and city life on 23rd November 2021 at 2 to 4:15 p.m. Singapore time. I would like to state again that the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week aims to increase awareness of global antimicrobial resistance and to encourage best practice among the general public health workers and policymakers to avoid the further emergence and spread of drug-resistant infection, which are the objective of the webinar today. Importantly, this year, FAO and FAWA collaborative project on empowering veterinarians in Asia towards fulfilling their roles on the Global Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance has already been conducted many activities on celebrating the Wow 2021. This satellite webinar is one of these activities on AMR awareness among FAWA members countries, which today hosted by Singapore. And FAWA would like to invite our members hold hands together celebrating this event. On behalf of FAWA Office Bangkok and the project coordinator, I would like to express our sincerest gratitude to Dr. Kwasa Nizam Madin bin Hassan Nizam, FAWA President, on his honorable opening address. Dr. Mary Joy Godoncillo, AMR Regional Project Coordinator, as the representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Asia and the Pacific region, FAO RAP, and her esteemed keynote lecture on the topic of AMR mitigation in food and agriculture in the Asia Pacific region, FAO milestones, lessons, and ways forward. And the invited speaker, Dr. Edmund Chu, Singapore Food Agency, Dr. Julene Chua, NParks, Animal Veterinary Service, Singapore, on sharing the excellent lecture on AMR. Dr. Timothy Schur, the President of Singapore Veterinary Association, our moderator, and all the Singapore Veterinary Association board members. And lastly, the VNU Exhibition Asia Pacific on jointly organized the webinar with a great success. FAWA looks forward to more cooperation with you in the future ahead. See you again. Stay healthy and safe. Thank you. ขอบคุณค่ะ
All right. Thank you, Dr. Achara, for your closing remarks. Thanks a lot for FAVA's support for this entire event, and of course the entire initiative. Thanks a lot for all the effort that you put in. Yeah, and of course I want to thank VNU as well for organizing this on the back end as well. So they are really putting a lot of effort to make today's session a great success. So I think we also have some slides as well to promote the next two events, right? And of course at the end of the right. So firstly with the poll first. So we really want to hear your feedback about this event today. And so if you should actually be able to see this evaluation form. It's only 2 or 3 questions. So if you can, if everyone could actually just quickly fill up that fill up that evaluation form, that'd be great. We will be able to know how to best address it and make the next event even more successful than today's one. So really appreciate your time. Yeah, so there are a few questions there, so please feel free to answer it, and in the meantime, as you're filling up, we also like to announce some of these further events, future events that we have. And so one of it is actually tomorrow, 24th November, 10 a.m. Bangkok time. It's a virtual meeting on antimicrobial stewardship strategy in livestock production in Thailand. And so this is the program for tomorrow. So again, there'll be a great lineup of programs as well. So please feel free to join in as well. Yeah. So you can actually use the QR code to scan and register. So thanks a lot, everyone, for your time. Good to see you guys, and hope to see you again next time, hopefully physically as well.